What's up everyone, another day, another slay, and it is my genuine pleasure to tell you that this year's Game Awards actually gave Spider-Man 2 the exact amount of awards it deserved. Absolutely fucking zero.
Forza Motorsport.
Neil Newbar.
Alan Wake 2.
Hi-Fi Rush.
No surprise here. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Alan Wake 2.
The year is Spider-Man 2. Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes, that's right, at the Game Awards, out of 7 nominations, Spider-Man 2 earned literally none of them. Not Game of the Year, not Best Performance, not Best Action and Adventure, not Best Game Direction, and absolutely fucking not Best Narrative. And in celebration of it winning nothing, I decided why not shake the hornet's nest even more after my last video talking about the game, and talk about another major issue I have with this game's narrative, and that is none other than the game's core structure. The fuck do you mean I had this video planned a few days after that video came out and then got overloaded with homework because senior year has been actually fucking insane? You're fucking crazy. Spider-Man 2 has some of the worst pacing I have seen in any story-based game ever. Now, one trend that I've noticed after looking at a bunch of the modern story-based games from the last like 5 years or so is that for every story-based game that Sweet Baby Inc. has had a hand in, that I've seen at least, the pacing in the game has been god-awful. Exhibit A, we can go back last year to God of War Ragnarok. Now, I'll be 100% fair here and say that the overall story in God of War Ragnarok is very good. It's one of the best of the last 10 years if I'm being honest. But it does have one critical issue, and that is its pacing. There is way too much going on in this fucking game for its own good. You look at God of War 2018. Very basic story here. Kratos travels up a mountain to spread the ashes of his wife. Obviously, it goes a little deeper than that, but for the most part, you can explain the entire story with that single line. God of War Ragnarok, on the other hand, it's prophesized at the end of the last game that Kratos is going to die, and their friend from the first game is now trying to hunt Kratos down and kill him. But also, Odin wants Kratos to join him to take over the 9 realms. But Kratos said no, which pissed Odin off, so now a war is coming, and now they're looking for Tyr so he can lead the armies against Odin, and they find him, but he doesn't want to kill anybody, so now Kratos has to lead the armies. But Atreus is getting pissed off at Kratos because he still treats Atreus like a little kid, so now he runs off to see what's actually going on with Odin. And it turns out Odin wants to put a mask together to see the meaning of life, and then Atreus starts to help him, but then he gets suspicious of Odin and goes back to Kratos, where now they plan to betray Odin after they put the mask together. So they do it, but it turns out Odin was here the whole time and knew what they were planning, and he kills one of the troll guys from the first game. Oh no! And now there's an all-out war against Odin where everyone from across the last 2 games joins in to fight him, and they kill him, and Kratos lets Atreus go off on his own. Yeah. The tonal whiplash between these 2 games is absolutely insane. We have one game where the story can be described in a single sentence and its direct sequel, which would probably take a full page to even describe what the fuck is happening in its plot completely. Don't get me wrong, I like Ragnarok, but this game could have been split up into at least a whole trilogy of games. Like, goddamn, there is way too much going on here and not enough time to give each concept or idea they have here the full attention they deserve. And it just becomes essentially a compilation of really well-written scenes all jumbled together haphazardly into one game. For example, Freya's revenge and her forgiving Kratos. Like, why is that just a subplot in this game that's solved in the first 6 hours? That was like one of the main plot lines of the last game. The war against Asgard. Again, we could have gotten an entire game dedicated directly to that. Kratos finding Tyr. Once again, an entire game could have been made out of it. A story can only have so much coverage in it before it just becomes exhausting. And God of War Ragnarok's story is one of the most exhausting game stories I have ever played. One thing I will give credit here is at least the scenes in a bottle are very well done, or at least as well done as they could have been with these circumstances. And it does retain a consistent theme for the entire game of letting go. But there's still just way too much going on in this game for its own good. And that brings us back to the topic of today's video, which are the mainline Insomniac Spider-Man games, or more specifically Spider-Man 2. I think it's pretty evident that if you played either of these games, they had the exact same problem as God of War Ragnarok. See, the Spider-Man games have a 3-act structure, or really it's a quote-unquote 3-act structure, because these 3 acts are pretty much 3 entirely separate games. A real 3-act structure has the intensity of what's happening in the narrative going slowly up more and more over time as they eventually reach to the climax. And yeah, you know the rest of basic story structure shit, I'm not going to remind you about it. While the story structure is supposed to be like a hill, the structure of the mainline Spider-Man games looks more like a zigzag pattern, where the intensity intensity of the events happening just goes up and down over and over again. And this, I would say, is honestly Spider-Man 2018's fatal flaw with its storytelling. There is way too much going on here to properly create effective drama and allow the player to process everything that's happening here. The Spider-Man games are structured more like a Spider-Man miniseries than what it's trying to go for, which is more like a movie. But Josh, you love Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that movie has this zigzag storytelling for its 3-act structure, and yeah, it does. But it's like that on purpose to show that film's complete fucking absurdity. Its structure itself is a symbol for that movie. Now, let me ask you a question. For those of you who've played Spider-Man 2, what is the game's theme? Fuck if I know. This game cannot decide on what it wants its theme to be. Each act has its own theme. First off, in the first act, we have the two Spider-Men fighting Kraven. There's this constant talk about how both of the Spider-Men are carrying too much on their backs and need to shift some weight onto each other so they can do their job the best they can. Okay, this is a fine theme to do. Then, in the second act, when Peter gets the Venom suit, the theme switches to corruption and how enough traumatic things happening to someone can corrupt someone who used to be good. No mention of balance or weight shifting at all in this act. Then in the third act, when Harry gets corrupted by Venom, it's back to the first game's theme with self-sacrifice and shit. Once again, no mention of the previous two themes at all here, and because of these complete 180s with every act change, the story tries to say way too much, and when you try to say too much, you end up saying nothing at all. And like God of War, it's just fucking exhausting to sit through. So why do you think movies come out in trilogies? Well, yeah, actually, that's a bad example. Fine. Why do you think there are so many books that come out in trilogies? Because having all of those concepts put into one book is way too much for someone to be able to take in. So you divide it in half, or thirds, or even fourths sometimes, and take it one piece at a time. The same applies to TV shows with their individual episodes, or why games have different levels, or shit, even why different paragraphs exist instead of making everything all jumbled together in one paragraph. It's dividing and conquering. Now, these different divisions are obviously not created equal. Making a new paragraph in your manuscript is not the same as making a whole new book. It all kind of depends on the reason each thing is divided, and obviously making a new book is a lot harder than making a new fucking paragraph. The hard part is making each book, or game in this case, actually interesting enough for the player to get through and want to get to the next part. So you have to carefully plan out what to include in each part of the series to make them good on their own, but so much more when you consider them all together. And it's actually pretty hard if I'm being completely honest. That's why so many part ones of a movie piss people off, because they don't feel satisfying enough on their own. Is that really the film's fault? No, I wouldn't say so. Like, for example, Across the Spider-Verse from over the summer, I don't really know how you could tell that story and leave it as the part one of a story it is without pissing some people off, because the story just isn't complete yet. But it's better to leave some people pissed off than to have a 4-hour long movie, because that would just be fucking exhausting, and it would be really hard to understand and appreciate the messages and all the tiny details in that movie your first time through. Shit, it's already hard enough with that movie being 2.5 hours. Another example, if you had the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy as one movie, it would be fucking insane. Nobody would want to sit through that, and by the end of them sitting through it, they'd be fucking exhausted. Because it's not like these games and stories don't have potential. They absolutely do. There's a reason why Spider-Man is such a successful IP, because these stories for the character are so rich in concept. The Peter Parker in the Insomniac games is my favorite interpretation of the character, at least with Peter Parker himself. He is perfect in these games. So yeah, just make the games into smaller parts of a trilogy for each game, or change the 3-act structure to 3 separate parts of the game released across like a 9-month or year-long period. Just think of it, you could have an entire game dedicated to Martin, Lee, and Peter slowly finding out that the man he's been hunting has been right under his nose and the boss of his aunt, and then it could go more into his backstory of why exactly Martin hates Norman Osborn so much. You could have an entire game dedicated to Dr. Octavius's inevitable downfall, which that downfall happening could be even more impactful because you've known this character for an entire game already, and then have Peter also digging into the conspiracy behind Norman Osborn. And then you could have an entire game with the Sinister Six and flesh the villains out in that way more. Like, one of my problems with Spider-Man 2018 is that it has the same issue that stuff like Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and No Way Home have, where there's just way too many villains and only 1 or 2 of them feel actually threatening. Having an entire game just dedicated to the Sinister Six, who you could also fight each of them separately in the previous game, would give the writers the opportunity to flesh them all out so much more. There's so many interesting backstories to these villains, like the Vulture dying of cancer, or how J. Jonah Jameson created Scorpion, or wherever the fuck Rhino and Electro came from, and they barely touch on any of it. It's so disappointing. To give credit where credit is due, Spider-Man 2 does fix this issue by having 2 two obvious main villains, but that's not the issue Spider-Man 2 would even need to focus on if they just worked on making the Sinister Six all threatening by giving Spider-Man his own game against them. People love the Sinister Six because it's like the anti-Avengers of Spider-Man's world. All of his biggest villains that he's fought throughout the years are teaming up against him, that you like know the context of them all and shit, but they don't give us any of that backstory whatsoever. Now, like I said, there would obviously be some story changes that you'd have to make for each part of these trilogies. That's undeniable. So yeah, I think the main changes you would have to make here with Spider-Man 2 is really just split it into parts that are released across like a 9-month to a year-long period. That way you have time to digest what the fuck just happened in the part rather than it all being thrown at you at once and it just becoming exhausting. And I guess here we could talk about the Insomniac leak, because funnily enough, Insomniac seems to be taking this idea into consideration, and it's possible now that they'll split Spider-Man 3 up into several parts, which honestly would be fucking great. But now the problem with this is the corporate side of them, because along with this initially good news, it's also rumored that they're going to charge $50 for each part of this game, totaling it out to be $150 for one game. That is fucking insane. As if asking for $70 for a game wasn't enough, now they want to start charging more than double that. So really, it seems like a lose-lose scenario. Either Insomniac makes another game with a dog shit story and super undercooked ideas and really unclear themes, or charges $150 for the version of their game with a somewhat decent story. But dear viewer, there is a final compromise here, and that is,
used to say I keep a check. She was all bad, nevertheless. Calling it quits now, baby, I'm a wreck. Crash at my place, baby, you're back.
There's a reason I've been referring to the Spider-Man games as the mainline Spider-Man games, because there's also another Spider-Man game that came out in 2020, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and it is easily the best in this Insomniac series by a long shot, at least in its story, and that is because it knows what it wants to do. The story is still larger in scale than the DLC for Spider-Man 2018, but it's not throwing everything but the kitchen sink in. It tackles Miles' relationship with his family and friends and him learning to be Spider-Man on his own, and that's about it. And the best part is, it's not too long either. Both Spider-Man 2018 and Spider-Man 2 drag on for an insane amount of time, especially around the beginning of each act change. Miles Morales doesn't have these act changes, so it functions how an actual movie would, where the intensity of what's happening in the plot is naturally going up over time. So really, I think the best case scenario here is to just make the games exactly like how Miles Morales was. Know what story you want to tackle or adapt and do it. Don't force in like 5 stories that could be their own game into one game. And if you want to have them building towards something with an overarching narrative, do it like how pre-Phase 4 MCU did, where you sprinkle in all these little hints in throughout the series. And yeah, that's what I'd do to fix Spider-Man 2's pacing issues. I know I also didn't really touch on the side quests, because to be 100% honest, I don't know what the fuck they are. I have not finished this game. I am not buying a PS5 for this dog shit. I played like the first 4-ish hours of it up until the end of Act 1 at my friend's house, who has a PS5, and then I watched a Let's Play of it to the end of the main story. So yeah, I've heard from people how the side quests are good, but at the same time, they called this game story good, so, you know, maybe that's a video for another day, I don't know. But yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of Spider-Man 2's pacing issues. Now, before I finish off the video, I have a few takes I wanted to respond to on my last video, because holy shit, they are actually terrible.
Wait till you see the... No.
Peter has gone on several hiatuses in the comics. Just shows how ignorant you casuals are to the source material.
Oh my god. The age-old, well, it happened in the comics deflection to any criticism of a Marvel or DC property. This shit has always been so fucking dumb to me. We should not be comparing non-canon adaptations to their source material. Just because something happened in the comics does not mean it needs to happen in the adaptation. Once again, to be honest, I have not read a single Marvel comic in my life, and I really don't care enough to, because I don't need to. Adaptations are supposed to stand on their own, especially if they aren't canon to what they're adapting. If the adaptation is good, someone who hasn't paid any attention to the source material should be able to go into it understanding everything that's going on in it if they're actually paying attention. Now, if something is a canon adaptation, like for example Cyberpunk Edgerunners, then yeah, I'd say it's fair to have some expectation that the people viewing it already know stuff about the source material. But with Spider-Man, I should be able to understand everything happening if I played all 3 of these games from what the writers establish in either the actual game itself or the lore notes, without reading the comics or watching the movies. Also, adaptations can change things that happen in the source material. If dumb shit happens in the adaptation, it's not immune from criticism because it happened in the source material. If it's dumb or doesn't fit the story, it's dumb and doesn't fit the story. It's as simple as that. According to Google at least, Harry Osborn has never been Venom in the comics, and there is no bitching there because These people don't actually care about whether something is comic accurate or not. They just want to defend this piece of shit game because they thought Venom was cool in it. Oh, well, it happened in the comics. Motherfucker, Thanos has a helicopter in the comics, and that is not an Infinity War Endgame. If everyone cared about comic accuracy so much, where is everyone's hashtag justice for the Thanos copter? Not to mention that it's not even really the fact that Peter went on a hiatus that bothers me here. He goes on a hiatus in Miles Morales too, and like I said, Miles Morales is the only well-written Spider-Man game in this series. It's the fact that he did it at the worst possible time when the world is still very much recovering from Venom's attack and needs his help. It is super out of character for everything established with this character. So I said it's not even the fact that he's going on a hiatus. He did it at one of the worst possible times in his career. And then this dumbass goes,
That's too much long. It's not real, bro. You need to take a step back. These characters do not exist when you aren't looking. Buck cares about his career. He wants to be with his family. Miles can take care of whatever, just like he has in the comics. Say what you want and the story and its beats, but him retiring for a little bit happens like all the time.
It's just so funny to me that this dude had no response to my point whatsoever of how it's the fact that he took a break at one of the worst possible times in his life, so he just went, who cares? It's not real. No fucking shit, but it should have some level of realism to it. Again, all of the best superhero movies have one thing in common. They have a level of realism to them. They make sense. They don't take you out of the story with stupid shit like the world just not giving a shit now that they know aliens exist, or them all being corrupted by an alien. This shit isn't even hard to write in. Just add in a few lines of random NPCs worried about what happened or shocked that they know aliens exist now. It's not hard. Like, remember all that bitching around the time Far From Home came out with people complaining about how Peter didn't want to help save the world, to be with his friends and go on a vacation? This is that exact shit all over again, beat for fucking beat.
Bro, he doesn't permanently retire and give up being Spider-Man. He's just taking a break. If he was retiring, why would they set up Green Goblin, who's his arch nemesis for the third game, and Doc Ock, who only has a connection to Peter, no one else? They also set up Carnage as potential DLC, who only encounters Peter in the game, meaning if that were to happen, Peter would be the focus of that.
One, I never said anywhere in the video Peter is giving up being Spider-Man or retiring, because he's not. He's taking a step back from being Spider-Man, which honestly is even worse because he's taking a step back at one of the most vital times when New York truly needs two Spider-Men. Honestly, now that I think about it, you don't even need to rewrite the ending to make it less out of character for Peter. You could literally just add in text where the ending cutscene starts of 1 year later and it'd be fine. And then Peter isn't literally abandoning a 17-year-old to an entire city that desperately needs both of their help to go help the environment. I mean, I can kind of see how people got the implication that I said Peter was retiring from how I compared his decision to Captain America's retirement in Avengers Endgame, and I also said it would make more sense for his character if the writers were to just have wrote him sacrificing his powers to save Harry's life, making him permanently no longer Spider-Man in the section where I rewrote the ending. But I wrote that ending not keeping any sequels in mind because nobody knows what the fuck is gonna happen in the next game. So I'm not gonna try to change shit for some hypothetical third game that I have no clue what happens in. I will take the L for not clarifying that. I know Peter isn't retiring in that video, but again, a lot of y'all were just jumping to conclusions of that I was saying Peter was retiring when I said nothing of the sort in the video. Not to mention, the writers did say that Miles is now the main Spider-Man in the franchise now, but you know what, I'll throw this person a bone here. These writers are on fucking crack, and they're probably gonna do a complete 180 on this statement in the next game, or they could even do that 180 in the DLC if I'm being honest. I seriously do not know who hates Miles more. The rednecks on YouTube who say he's not Spider-Man or the fucking writers, because the only reason they made him the main Spider-Man at the end is to bring this game's ESG score up. Now, to fix the issue with Miles just having nothing important to do in the game, I really don't know yet. Again, I think that's another one of the core issues in this game, that they really underutilize his character and don't give him the respect he really deserves. And to be honest, you'd probably have to scrap the whole game's story entirely to make Miles have a truly active role against the villains rather than just Peter's sidekick. Maybe I'll make another video talking about how I would fix him in the game. If I find I still have nothing to make, I'll probably do a video on that, honestly. So yeah, I'm done here. Once again, this game's writing sucks ass, and it takes almost everything bad about the first game and just maximizes it here. So thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Follow my Twitter. If you really liked the video, you can become a member and give me money, but chances are you probably fucking hated the video and you want to shoot me. So, you know, I hope I ruined your day at this point.